Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. Now, you know that I have been wanting to talk about the schools reopening debate for a while now, and I am so excited to have Lindsey Grossman come in and speak on this matter much more officially than I can. She also happens to be one of my oldest and dearest friends from college. So I actually have gone to school with Lindsey, only in a totally different capacity. Thank you for being here, and tell me a little bit about what you're up to. This is kind of a catch up for us as well. So what is going on? What are you doing? And maybe give everyone a little background on how you got to where you are.
I actually studied when I was in college. I studied public relations and marketing, which really has nothing to do with education. And I loved my time at USC, but I really wasn't passionate about what I was doing. I grew up in a family of educators and always was moved by working with kids. And it was always something I really loved to do. It wasn't until senior year, I remember a bunch of kids were going to Cabo San Lucas for spring break, and it just didn't feel right to me. I wanted to do something different. So I decided to go to Guatemala and teach English to some children in a underprivileged area. And it really was an experience that changed me and kind of made me realize, like, wait, I don't think I want to go into public relations. Like, I want to do something more meaningful with my life. And from there, I eventually moved to New York, and that's where I am now. I went to graduate school and I got my degree in special education and general education, certified to teach elementary school up till 6th grade. And from there, I worked in public schools for a few years. Then I actually ended up leaving public schools to go work at a school for children with language-based learning disabilities. And that's where I've been the past few years. And in addition to that, I started my own tutoring business while working at that school. But yeah, there's a lot of going on in education right now and a lot to talk about. So happy to be here with you.
You know, obviously coronavirus threw everyone for a loop, but New York was kind of the epicenter for a while. But now New York has some of the lowest infection rates in the country. And so if any school district is going to open, New York is up there on the list. But that doesn't mean there aren't controversies.
I work in a school with children who have language-based learning disabilities. So oftentimes they're auditory language processing disorders, dyslexia, and these are students that require a lot of support in the classroom, whether it's additional teachers, it's small groups, it's hands-on learning, it's multi-sensory learning. To go virtual was extremely challenging. Every child is different, but some kids I really felt like I just couldn't reach them. It was truly an impossible task, and these kids needed to be in school. It was upsetting as an educator because we were learning every day these new platforms and all these amazing new technologies and apps and things that we were learning. We're not technology pros in any way, and I'm relatively technologically savvy. I'm younger, but then I have teachers who've been teaching for 30 plus years, and they're just not as comfortable with technology. And how can I manage being there as much as I can for my kids, and while also learning this entire new structure of a classroom that, you know, no one has ever done before.
Another idea that's been floated around is this idea of hybrid classrooms. So maybe explain to everyone what the hybrid classroom is and what your thoughts are on that.
First of all, I must say that my school is a private school for children that have disabilities. So that's one piece that I have to say with being virtual. We were given a lot of resources that were extremely helpful that public school educators just did not have. In terms of the hybrid model, as a parent, you can either say, I want my child to be fully remote, or I'm going to opt in for potentially 1 to 3 days of in-person learning where they're going to limit the number of students in a classroom. I think the bottom line for me is we all want kids back in school. I don't think there's any educator, principal, anyone out there who says they don't want kids back in school. That's not the issue here. It's, can we have our kids back in school and have everybody, the kids, their families, the educators, the custodial staff, think about all the people that are required to make a school run safely and efficiently. Can we keep everybody safe? And that's the question that is really difficult to answer.
So what would it take for you to feel safe to go back to school?
What would it take for me to feel safe? I mean, obviously maintaining 6 feet of distance, everybody wearing masks, these deep cleaning that they're referring to, it needs to actually happen. Having students bring their own materials. And I mean, as a public school educator, the first school I worked at out of graduate school, was a Title I school. And I, as a teacher, I spent probably like $2,000 on my own classroom just because there weren't enough materials, whether that's pencils, paper, everything. I had to vacuum the floors of my own classroom. Like that was the reality in New York City public school. And yet they say they're going to deep clean. That sounds great, but what does that really mean? Is that happening in all Title I schools? Because I had to buy hand sanitizer for my class. I had to buy soap for my class. Are teachers going to be responsible for doing that? Where is this money coming from? Because their budgets haven't changed. And that's where I become wary of the situation.
What about the students who can't get their own materials, or is lack of access to internet something that comes up a lot?
17% of students nationwide do not have a computer at home. So what does that mean? 17% of students, if everything goes remote, just aren't going to have an education at all. That doesn't seem fair. There's a huge achievement gap between low income, middle income students. And when we all go remote or students aren't in the classroom, that gap is just going to widen, which is why a lot of people are pushing for schools to reopen. We don't want this gap to become even wider. It's detrimental to the kids and it's detrimental to our society. And truly, I think everybody is going to be behind because of what's happened with this pandemic, and it's scary.
You've actually experienced this online virtual experience, which everyone seems to be talking about, but very few people have actually done. So what was it like teaching kids on Zoom or online?
So some days were better than others, and some students were able to interact and get what they needed to do done. Where some other kids, there were a lot of sending of emojis, a lot of side chatting.
The 21st century note passing.
Yeah, it's totally. It's, a lot of thumbs up on Zoom and all of that, which became really distracting. And it was difficult. Like, all of a sudden, like your toddler's running into the room with a teacher jumping on the teacher's lap. That's pretty disruptive too. I have a student who's a little younger. He was in first grade. He was just having a really rough day and just kept running away from the camera. There's not much I can do. In the classroom, I would have sort of different strategies of how to approach him when he was having a difficult day. But then when he runs away from the camera and I'm a virtually teaching him, I'm like, okay, well, I'll just sit here and wait for your parents to come retrieve me.
Yeah, you just sat there like waiting for him to jump back into.
All right.
You like text the parents like your son is gone.
They were pretty aware of that, but yes, it was like very challenging.
There's so many creative ideas being put forth, and I know that educators and political leaders this is one of the most important things, as it should be. But I think it is really important to hear the perspective of people who are actually in it rather than all of these theoreticals, which is exactly why I wanted to talk to you.
Absolutely. I wish that there was more information for me to learn how to build community online. And that's such an important part of education today. People aren't sitting in rows anymore. People are collaborating. And that's kind of the 21st century way of, when you go into the workforce, you're not sitting by yourself in a cubicle. You're interacting with others. They don't have walls in between offices anymore. I mean, that's all the way that we work and we live today. And with how do we build that community online, and how do we encourage students to talk to one another? And when you're online, it's just, you're missing that.
I want to touch a little bit just on the debate that's going on in unions. I want to explain to everyone first what a union actually is. So a union is basically just an organized group of workers. And when they organize and they come together, they're able to be more powerful and demand certain protections, whether it's safety and health regulations or higher wages. I mean, historically, labor unions have played a really critical part in workers' rights. Essentially, the teachers' union is backing their members and saying that if teachers don't feel safe, they should not be forced to go back to school, because the White House threatened to cut off federal funding to schools that don't reopen. So that's kind of the latest news update. I guess I just wanted to get some of your thoughts on that.
Until there's a vaccination and until contact tracing can really be effective, it's just so hard to ever imagine a way for me personally, and I think many, to really feel like it's going to be safe to return. I think about Major League Baseball because teachers and professional athletes have so much in common. No, but what's happening if you watch baseball? pro sports teams have now come back together. They have all of the money that they need. They have robust testing. They have really elaborate safety protocol, but yet there have been outbreaks on teams. If a Major League Baseball team can't do it, how are public schools going to do it?
I think that's completely reasonable and a really good point. I just want to end on maybe a slightly positive note, because these are really, really huge challenges that we're facing. And I didn't expect to solve them in this conversation. I just really, really wanted to get your perspective, and I really appreciate that. So I don't have that many parents who watch this, but I do have a lot of students. And so I want to know, what would be your advice to them if their high schools and colleges do end up going virtual this fall? How can they get the most out of this online school experience?
I would say you need to advocate for yourself more than you ever have. If you're having a hard time on an assignment, if you have questions in your classroom, ask for help. Teachers are there to help you. Ask, and you don't even need to even ask your teacher, ask a friend. I think advocating for yourself is the biggest thing you can do right now, because it's new for everybody. Oftentimes teachers have these virtual office hours, and if they don't have enough, reach out to maybe an administrator, say like, I really need this time with my teacher. Email them, make sure that they're able to speak to you directly, because we all want you guys to be successful. And I think that if you don't ask, it's hard to not let a student slip through the cracks. So make yourself known. I think that's the most important thing you can do.
Well, I'm wishing all of you the best, your students the best, you the best. Keep us posted.
Will do. Thanks for having me.
Good luck.
Thank you so much. It'll be interesting to see what happens in a month.